You're listening to another episode of the Ana Vivo podcast. Thank you for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to anavivo.com, the podcast where we talk about all things shenanigans inside my mind, the mind of your host, Tim C. Miller. And we're doing part 2 today of the Extraction Team. Or the A-Team?
Sure. Go with that.
We have with us the heroine, Jessica Boyd, traveling nurse, French speaker.
Wannabe.
We have with us on the line, all the way from Juneau, Alaska, the boots on ground, the walking hug, the wonderful help on overseas, Nate Miller, the fourth brother of the escapade here. And, of course, myself.
Yes.
And we're going to be discussing here kind of our point of view. Where we left you off, audience, was the parents there and what they had expected, and then what went horribly awry. And now we're going to pick up for this part 2 on what we experienced on the state side of it all. So without further ado, I guess I'll intro it back into, we left off where 4 of us brothers are building a raft, and Monroe Landing here on Whidbey Island. We're having a great day at the beach. Jessica's not supposed to be here, but she is in Wenatchee normally, and so she was up visiting for the weekend. Her dad was in town, my Uncle Mark, and it just worked out really well that they were there. And then Grace got the message, and we all kind of piled off the raft and came back in and realized things were unfolding quickly. With this accident, yeah. And so at that point, I think we all kind of, Jessica had mentioned it on the last episode, but we all sort of went right into our roles, or right into our natural, what we do and who we are. From a ENTJ perspective on my end, Myers-Briggs, personality-wise, to the leadership roles, to the organizing, to being able to just drop everything and these guys just to jump on a plane and go. And then, of course, from literally hundreds of people, friends and family around the United States and the world, praying and supporting financially, and all of this stuff just sort of coming together. So,
yeah, my first take. Sorry, I know Nate will let you talk in just a second.
No, that's
my first take was, Grace kind of rallied the family together, with this shocking information, and just kind of seeing the realization set in every single person a little bit differently of like, oh, how serious is this? Because we were kind of interpreting cryptic messages of like, oh, really bad accident, alive,
right,
medevacing to another island, dad's talking. This is from Bev's perspective. Clay's still talking, but he's repeating himself. Mm-hmm. They're doing a ultrasound of his internal organs. Definitely has a broken, or has some sort of like bump on his shoulder. That's kind of the story we were putting together, but through very like cryptic text messages on Clay's phone. And so for me, it was really interesting to see, like, right away, Becky and Grace were like, okay, who do we need to text? Who do we need to include? The guys were starting to figure out, like, emotionally, okay, what does this mean? And we were just kind of running through the scenarios of like, okay, they've moved on to internal organs. They're getting ready to medevac Clay to another island. What does this mean? Mm-hmm. What can we put into our algorithm with our limited information? And Tim just immediately starts to go into logistics mode too, as far as, I think you maybe took a second and let emotions sink in and then just went into go mode, as far as like coordinating people, calling the hotel on Bora Bora to get their passports. And because I think the hotel grabbed their passports and 2 cell phones and shoved it in the ambulance with them somehow.
Yeah, well, Mom, she had heard that ding on Dad's phone.
At the accident site.
She grabbed Dad's phone from there. And hers was the only one on the international plan. But I am my father's son, and Dad does a great job of leaving a master itinerary before he goes on a trip. And that is really the key to all of this. And for anyone listening, the takeaway from all of this is leave an itinerary with your friends and family.
Very detailed. Great packers, too. We can talk about that, Nate. We experienced, picking up their suitcases for them. But just right away, go ahead.
No, I was saying absolutely. It's extremely important to have that itinerary because I feel like this would have been a lot harder of a situation if that weren't there.
Yeah, especially because, we were trying to figure out what island are they on. We knew they start off in Bora Bora, but
nobody actually cares what vacation they're on until something goes south, and then they're like, how many islands are in this chain, and which one are they on?
Where are they? Which ocean? So I think we were trying to figure out, and maybe you figured this all out in the back scenes, Tim, because I went back home to Grandma's house and sat there with my dad and Grandma as my dad kind of broke the news to Grandma very gently. It was a very sweet moment. Mm-hmm. And you were already in logistics mode, across the field.
I was already planning on you leaving, actually.
Oh, were you?
So.
God speaks more clearly to Tim.
No,
more quickly.
That's not necessarily true, but I really, really wanted to go, and I have God has blessed me with the finances to be able to just jump on the plane and go, and the flexibility to just jump on the plane and go. But really, within that first hour, I realized there was nothing I could do for them over there. And that was, for me, the hardest part of, I think, the whole situation was, man, emotionally, as their son, I want to be there. I want to hold my mom. She's alone in her hospital on one end, on a separate island. Dad's in a coma at this point on his own hospital. I want to be there as their son and do whatever I can to comfort them. But then the logical side of realizing I'm also a real estate broker, and Dad is a real estate broker. I need to cover for his business while he's gone, and however long that takes. And so on one end, the logistics of the work and covering for him and for Mom, because that's her source of income. But then also to be able to say, who else can do the logistics side of this and be as anal as I am when it comes to
the role you were meant to play, Tim. Is perfect.
When it comes
the Doberman pincher of the family.
When it comes to the itineraries and things like that. And so following Dad's itinerary and being able to coordinate overseas logistics and sort of just quarterback it from here is the role that I knew I needed to play. And so being able to, I was already planning on sending you, the nurse, French speaker.
He already had this plan within an hour, I feel like. Meanwhile, I'm just kind of like running algorithms through my head and my limited ability. Let me just be clear. I am a gastroenterology nurse. It's a very non-critical care nurse. But I do have a history of critical care experience. And so...
and French speaking.
And French speaking from 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. But do have some tools under my belt and a very, very foggy, limited toolbox. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to figure out what's going on and also be present with Graham as she is accepting, some pretty harsh news. And so I walk back over the field. We have a bonfire. And again, we're reprocessing. And now Tim has already made a plan for every person in the family. And he's just bottom line, has figured out, okay, we're in trouble. Who are we going to deploy? Whatever. What are we going to do? And I'm still quite behind. Let's just walk through the algorithms again and what could happen. And I think you kind of mentioned you had called the hotel and they spoke French. Mm-hmm. So getting their suitcases was frustrating because they couldn't speak English. Yeah,
and really the key at this point was to get a charger for their phone.
Yeah, so we didn't explain that. Sorry. Yeah. They got in an accident on Bora Bora, mm-hmm. and it was this, really incredibly destructive ATV vehicle.
Yeah, listen to part one if you haven't.
Part one, yep.
Listen to part one.
So they immediately load them into the ambulance and take them to this little tiny, standalone clinic.
Veterinary clinic.
Vet clinic. The story, which I don't know if this is true, is that they had to call in the doc from crabbing, to come take care of them. And they immediately start triaging them. They find out that Bev has a broken hip. Clay is critically injured with broken neck. Pretty much all of his ribs are broken, punctured lung, injured spleen, injured liver, injured kidney. And so they medevac both of them via helicopter or plane to a middle-sized island called Raiatea.
Yeah, it was via helicopter from Bora Bora to Raiatea.
Yeah.
And then because Dad was so much more critical, they did follow-on X-rays there at Raiatea at this little hospital. And due to the severity of his injuries, they decided to immediately airlift him via plane then to the larger hospital in Tahiti. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's how Mom got separated.
Yeah. And so she kept the phone but didn't have a charger. There were no English speakers there. Down in those hospitals, they don't provide like pillows and blankets. Mm-hmm. So she's kind of all alone. We kind of joked later on, like it looked like a little prison cell. She didn't even really have a window.
Right. She had a rooster to tell time.
Yeah. So for 4 days, she doesn't really, I think she's kind of like walkie-talking back with her like 1% power left on her phone back to us. And then we would call the hospital in Tahiti and then call her back.
Yeah, they sent Dad's phone ahead with him. She gave Clay's phone, Dad's phone, to the staff to fly with him to Tahiti. So she had her phone, which was not on an international plan. But she did have Wi-Fi, and we were able to get her phone on a plan. Although, again, she didn't have the charger. So a lot of just little logistic things like that. And she's totally alone. Nobody speaks English. No pillows, no hospital
pillows.
What did she say? I mean, we'll get this in part 3 of their point of view. But she was in the same clothes from the accident for multiple days, covered in mud and things like that, and just still in shock mostly. Outside of the pain, of course, and just totally, utterly alone, which is hard to think about as your mom is out there. But so then,
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, if I could add too, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, Jess, you mentioned that that you guys got the news, and within an hour, Tim had this whole kind of plan formulated, but everybody there was still, potentially still in just like what could happen, and kind of everything's kind of running through people's minds. And meanwhile, as you just mentioned, Mom and Dad are getting airlifted from one island to the next, and then Dad's getting, separated from Mom from one island to the next. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that all happened within 24 hours, right?
Oh, less. Yeah. He arrived.
Less.
So I think that, the accident happened like, oh gosh. So Whidbey time was like, what time? Like 2:00 in the afternoon. And then he arrived in Tahiti at 1 a.m. on Sunday. So 12 hours was that basic chunk of time. Well, 12 hours. So 1 a.m. their time. And they're how many hours behind? Gosh, let me look it up. But
Jamie, can you
searching
get that information for us?
Yeah. But within a short amount of time, this story unfolds, and we are not really in the loop. We're trying to figure out, maybe Tim is getting messages from the doctors at this point, but we as a family are trying to figure out information. And you're in Alaska, so tell us what your your process was.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is like, as all of this is happening within less than 24 hours, I'm over here and I'm taking a nap, and I feel
just dinking around.
I'm just dinking around. I'm taking a nap. I look up and I see that Mom had messaged, "Hey, we were in a," and I think it was from Dad's phone or something, but it was, "Hey, we're in an accident. We're at the hospital now." And then that was, I think, at the vet clinic while they're administering dog medicine to Mom and
deworming.
And I think I was. Yeah, and I think I was just sitting there in my logical / there's no need to put everything into a box. Like I can't do anything right now until I get more details. And so I'm kind of just, like you said, just dinking around, just waiting for the next news to come along. And meanwhile, mom and dad are getting airlifted to different islands, and then you guys are formulating your plans. And I think as time goes on over the next 12 to 24 hours, I'm kind of having that conversation with my wife of like, okay, if this is as bad as it potentially can be, who's flying out there? Is somebody going to fly out there? Can I fly out there? And not only the logistics of, okay, can I leave? Because a little back history, but like we just got back we moved here from Texas, where I was deploying for 4 months at a time, twice a year. And so I was away from the family for a lot of birthdays and holidays and stuff. So that was one part of the conversation. Hey, are you guys okay with me leaving again to fly out here to go be with mom and dad?
Because it's Milo's birthday,
even
right?
though we don't. And that was I left on Sarah's birthday, August 9th, from Juneau. And I didn't return until I think after Milo's birthday, the 17th, August 17th, if I remember right. So I mean, but again, that was one side of the conversation is like, and they were like, yeah, absolutely. Like without hesitation, which I'm so thankful for them for is I know you're going to do this, and I know you were gone from us for these last birthdays and stuff, but this is your family. You guys gotta go take care of them. So that was one side. And then being in the military, you can't just say, okay, bye bosses, I'm leaving, my family's in an accident. Like you can say that, but there's still so much paperwork that you have to do. And so that then became my checklist is, okay, I got to knock out all this paperwork that people normally do 60 days before they go to a foreign country. And I now have to do this as quickly as possible because I don't know how long mom and dad are going to be there for. I could get all this paperwork done and fly out there, and then they could be medevaced back to the States, which would have been a great, situation for them. But I gotta knock out all this stuff before, because I don't know when the next big update or change is going to happen. And that included getting a new passport because I hadn't paid attention to my passport and it had expired. So that was a whole thing in and of itself. But but yeah, that's where I was.
Yeah,
I know, like, just everything.
I feel like we were all, collectively processing and like revving up the engines to go at the same time as waiting. Like I remember going to bed that night and I couldn't sleep at all and was like starting to realize, oh, I speak French. I'm a nurse. I'm a travel nurse. As long as I get it clear, I can, potentially go. And I texted Tim at like 1 a.m. and he was like, well, let's see if dad makes it through the night. So it's like kind of this, like, we're prepping to go, but also this story is still unraveling. We don't know what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so I think by 1 p.m. on Sunday, we had our first actual phone call with a doctor there. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe he had sent a report at that time, and we knew that Clay was still alive.
Yeah. And
it was still very cryptic about how critical it was. I remember having to ask, because they kept saying, oh, he's stable, but that was like the big takeaway for a couple of days. Oh, he's stable. I was like, well, what does that mean? Yeah. And so it was like, great to be a part of that. Tim let me sit in and ask, like, okay.
I didn't let you. I needed you. I don't speak French.
Yeah, right. It was very broken English. So like, gosh, what does thorax mean? Oh, you put in a chest tube.
Well, yeah, it's not just the French part. It's the medical. Even if they're giving me English medical stuff, what that actually means.
Right.
What they're saying behind what they're saying.
Right. One, Tim, his logistics are so great. So, he had to track down the doctor in both hospitals. Like, okay, please connect me to whoever is taking care of each one of my parents. And then when you did get a hold of them, it was like, okay, we have a timer of 3 minutes and we need to figure this out across a different language, and figure out, okay, is he on oxygen? Is he intubated? Is he awake? Tell us the dirty real fast, please, as best you can.
Yeah, so they're at this point in two separate hospitals. Mom's in this little hospital that has one phone at the front desk that they have to walk back to her on a line.
Oh, and they both are COVID positive at this point.
Oh, that's true. We didn't even add that in yet.
Asymptomatic.
So they both are asymptomatic but tested positive for COVID. And so they've got them isolated, even more alone. Mom's got this nurse. The secretary up front has the one phone that she's kind of walking back every hour for me to call and try to, one, comfort mom and get more details, but also, connect with the doctor there. And then on Dad's side, he's at this point now in a medical coma and not speaking anymore, which will be that way basically for the next 3 weeks on and off.
No, he's still speaking at this point.
Oh, he is? Mm-hmm. I thought he was.
Yeah, he was speaking when I got down there.
Oh, that's right, because he called. He did call me.
Yeah, and we have a FaceTime photo with Bev.
Right,
between him and Bev, and he's not.
So I guess he
was.
Was he on and off?
No, so I think I wrote this down, and I have to go back, but I think he was not intubated for Sunday, because I think, and maybe even some of Monday.
Okay.
I have to go back and look.
And then because of the breathing.
Because he broke all of his ribs, he couldn't
and the pain
expand his chest all the way. He couldn't cough to clear all the gunk that was building in his lungs.
So then they intubated him.
Yeah, partly to give him more pain medicine so they could control his breathing, but also he did develop pneumonia, which is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit.
But he's not on his phone yet either, and so we're talking with the docs there in Tahiti and trying to coordinate all of that care as well. So then. Basically, that Sunday, Jess is over at my house on speakerphone with the doctors and broken French and medical French. And we're trying to sort of vet all of this information and parse through it. And at the same time, we had formed on the brothers' side a brothers-only message group to sort of walk through the worst case scenario of, hey guys, they may not make it. And so what does everyone want to do? And this was an opportunity for all of the brothers to go and make their peace essentially, and be provided for financially to fly out there and say goodbye or whatever. And so because we just didn't know and it was too early or so early, we just weren't sure if Dad was going to make it another night. And so the unique thing with Nate is that he's the only one that actually works.
We love all of you.
So the other four of us are all business owners. We're all self-employed W-9s, 1099s. Nate is a W-2, and what that means is he gets paid to take leave. And he gets emergency leave. And so shout out to the Red Cross and Nate's chain of command, and Nate and Sarah for coordinating and working, like you mentioned, his emergency passport, all the paperwork routing that you have to do to get that kind of stuff approved, but also the fact that if Seth or Ben or Steven had taken off to go, it would have cost them not just their time, but also then actual business,
and also
which they were in a lot of. I mean,
like
the
2 days
payments of the stuff were would by themselves, but then also their business gone for a week or whatever. So,
and sorry, I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah.
This kind of goes back to what we talked about in the last podcast. Of it really felt like through this traumatic experience that God's sovereignty was in each step. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, okay, there's people that can go. You know, these flights should be $3,000 to get down there. And I don't know, we don't need to talk about the numbers, but for me, somehow I got a fraction of the price. And like the window to go, like revealed itself very easily.
Right. It actually changed like 2 or 3 times. By the time you drove to Wenatchee and back, it had changed 2 or 3 times the flights.
Flight. Well, that's because, I left on Sunday and was like, well, let me know. I think we left church. We went to dinner, and I remember there was a bunch of cash being passed back and forth of like, gosh, you guys must have been chatting on your group chat at this point of like, who's going to go? Who are we going to send?
Yeah.
Do we need to get, $3,000 to pool money together to send Steven or to send Nate or whoever? And I was kind of just watching, getting ready for the phone call, which we had after church.
Yeah.
And then once we had that phone call, I was like, okay, Tim, let me know if you'd like me to go. I'm going to go get my passport in Wenatchee. Otherwise, I would get on a plane right now.
Yeah.
And so I think I was in the car for like 45 minutes and you called me and you're like, oh, Mom's friend Holly says that outcomes are better for patients that have a family member there. And I was like, yes, you are correct. What are you saying to him?
I know this.
He was like, well, we're sending Nate. We're getting him ready, but we would like you to go too. And I was like, that's what I needed to hear. And I think I pulled over right before the pass and bought a ticket for the wrong day.
Yeah. But that worked out because, like you're just saying, God's sovereignty. I mean, the one you ended up getting was somehow
affordable, like a fraction of the price. Yeah. And so it was just like this rush of like trying to buy tickets before I lose reception in the pass, and calling all my managers, letting them know.
Yeah. Yeah. So Nate is active duty. So he's got this ability to go and get paid. And out of the 5 of us boys, I call Nate a walking hug, which is a term of endearment, Nate.
The Labrador Retriever.
Because Nate is absolutely capable of everything, but he's also very laid back, and he's very good at just being a great emotional comforter.
He's the perfect man for the job.
Which is exactly what Mom needed and Dad needed.
And I needed, as it turned out. And
Jessica needed, as it turned out. And so it was a perfect storm and ability and God's sovereignty to be able to send this dynamic duo of both the assertive, door-kicking
husky
nurse husky that can do the boots on ground and I mean a great snapshot into this personality is both of them arriving at the airport and Nate also somehow not having his international plan turned on, and now he's just lost in the airport for wherever, and his phone's not working. And Sarah's texting me and saying, "Well, I can't get a hold of Nate." And I said, "I can't get a hold of Nate." And I'm talking to Jess, and she's like, "I'll go find him." And so, sure enough, she's makes her way through the airport and somehow finds.
To be fair, he found his way to me.
Okay.
I think I texted you and I was like, I'm not sure if I should be worried yet, but I think he can make it. I'm going to give him some time. And then you did.
And then Sarah was able
the first test, Nate. You made it.
And Sarah was able to get the international plan working, and we hijacked Nate's phone to put that on real quick and get it up to speed. So by the time they all connected, it worked out well, but it was just another example.
Yeah, so I want to talk about one more thing and give you an opportunity, Nate. But then, I'd like to transition into the arrival to Tahiti and go into that. And I feel like there's so many jokes that we're also going to get sidetracked on. But I just want to say also during this time, for me at this point, it took about like a day and a half to actually get to Tahiti. And Nate was, I think, flying to Seattle to get his emergency passport to go down. So we're both like slowly trying to make our way and also like go as quickly as possible. And getting these updates from the doctors. I think we finally got our first like 3-page update on like 1 a.m. on Monday.
Right.
But meanwhile, Tim is calling Singapore every night at like 2 a.m. I think you were calling the doctors at like 11 a.m. and then 12 midnight and then Singapore. So you're also coordinating your brothers, coordinating the church members, like all of these navigator community members. I don't know how you did that, like which family members need to know or don't know, but you did this beautiful job of including community.
Thanks.
Very quickly. Yes. Nate, did you have anything you want to say before we talk about arrival and the, transition to that part?
Boots on ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, Tim, whether it's your personality or what, but, you were the perfect ground-based controller for this whole situation. And I think it was important that you were able to see the, hey, I can go over there, God's blessed me financially, time-wise and everything to be able to drop everything and go over there. But I'm more of a use here on Whidbey and back at home. And I think, seeing everybody, obviously that's the good sign of a leader is being able to see everybody's strengths and weaknesses and say, okay, well, Jess, you, are gastroenterologist and you but you still have medical and which, thankfully didn't have to come into play during this whole trip. But, you still have that medical background in French speaking, just to be able to get to the hospital room, that mom and dad were staying in. You had that background and stuff. And I think I came to the realization that I have both zero medical experience or French speaking. I know Matthew 633 in French, but that's all from my middle school French classes. But I knew that also just from some experience that I have, knowing what tourists can go through, or just what U.S. citizens can go through in a foreign country, having to navigate like the medical system, or navigate just getting out of different countries and getting back to the U.S. I knew that at the very least, even though I can't help medical wise or French speaking, mom and dad are going to need a Miller boy there. And that's what I wanted to be for them, was even if it was just me sitting next to them, or going to get them water, or just advocating for them, for a fan or something like that. I knew that that's what I wanted to be there for them. And so that was the whole kind of baseline for me trying to get there, is being there so that I can at least be that connection between mom and dad, who are separated at this point, and then also to the rest of the community that like you said, just Tim got so involved with the whole process. I wanted to be a connection for them as well, back to to mom and dad. Even though you could have been that too, Jess, I just know that there's so much and we as we found out, there was so much going on with this whole that would be entailed with this whole process, is that we'd you'd have a lot to worry about already. So I wanted to basically take all that little minuscule stuff of going and grabbing mom and dad water, or going grabbing whatever, take that off of your plate, so that you could actually focus on helping mom and dad get
exactly
care.
What they needed.
And I'm so glad you came, because I think at that point, my experience, similar to yours, was in two camps. One of oh goodness, my experience in healthcare in foreign countries is in Haiti, where it's very third world. They don't even provide food there. Their medical care is just abysmal. And obviously Tahiti is not Haiti, but that was my gut reaction of I don't know what kind of care they're going to get. And after, when we did have conversations with them, we did get emails from them. They were getting care, but I was just I don't know what this is going to look like. I need to see for myself.
Right.
And I can't gather information quick enough. Meanwhile, I had no idea about, international medical evacuation flights. We're looking up air taxis, Yeah. And so I was I just need to get down there and figure this out, and, coordinate with Tim on this side, because he is completely figuring out their TRICARE versus, out of pocket versus, talking to all these organizations in different timelines around the world. And the other camp was gosh, I have had the fortunate and unfortunate experience of helping people pass away, and wanted to be there for Clay if that was the case. And I'm so thankful that you were there too, because I just think that is one of the best gifts you can have on either end, either for Clay or for family, is to have someone there during that experience. And, thank the Lord, that's not what we experienced. But I think I was prepared either way. And so that kind of leads us into Tuesday arrival. For me, I arrived at 7 p.m. And I think, just to put the spotlight on my experience, this was just a ground shaking experience for me, in the sense of, I have worked in the hospital in critical care in the past, have seen a lot of really just sadness. And then, I became a nurse because I did healthcare in Haiti, and was certainly an interesting thing to witness. And I just have never seen God's sovereignty bless someone so much through an event like this. And part of it is that there really is so much protection in praising God. And I experienced so much healing from seeing Bev and Clay, how they responded. Obviously, having a good outcome was so healing for me after seeing a lot of negative outcomes in the hospital. But then also, I have a lot of fear from Haiti, too, just like woven into my being. So when I arrived at 7 p.m., the sun had already set and it was dark. And I had traveled in 2020 and 2021 like a rebel internationally. Did some solo travel. But I was like, oh, goodness. In Haiti, you do not go out after dark. That is, I've been robbed out there before. I've had some of my scariest, experiences being out after dark. So I got there after dark. My Airbnb guy is not responding. I can't get the key. Just kind of like losing it for a second. And it all worked out, everything worked out. Got there on Tuesday night. And then finally got to see Clay, Wednesday morning. And that experience will never leave me. And I tell him, he's probably tired of me talking to him about it. But so when I arrived, he was intubated, which just means that he has a breathing tube in his airway, in his mouth, into his trachea to protect his airway. But he did have some pretty strong pain medication that can suppress your breathing. So it's a protective measure, but also he just needed help getting his secretions out of his lungs. He had developed pneumonia at this point, which can tumble out of control very quickly. Among many other complications that could happen. The reality is the longer someone's in the hospital, the more complications that can occur. So anyway, so he was still talking at this point, even though he had some sedation medication. And we got the whiteboard. The nurse gave me the whiteboard after finally finding him. And I was just so touched. The first thing he asks is, "Where's Bev?" And it just, for me, it was immediately like, oh, these two people are one person. Like he immediately, like he's, his body is like a crushed tin can at this point. And his mind is not completely there. He's on some pretty powerful meds and he's just in really strong pain. So, no one's really emotionally or mentally present in moments like that. And his first instinct was, he recognized my face and said, "Where's Bev?" I just was like so touched. And he wanted to know what happened. And then this was probably like a 15, 20-minute conversation. His next thing that he asked for was to listen to some music. I think he asked for details of what happened, and I could just tell he wasn't really processing it. So we kind of moved on. And I was texting Bev at the same time, like, "Hey, I see Clay. Hey, he's talking." Yeah. And she had said something like, "Oh, if you play music, play so-and-so." And so I was talking about Clay longer, and eventually he writes kind of over top of each other. So it's really hard to tell what he's writing. But he asked for "I Shall Not Want" by Audrey Assad. And then he asked for "Is He Worthy" by Andrew Peterson. And so we listened to those, and he feels, you can tell he's having a strong emotional reaction, but he's getting through it okay physically. Yeah. And so I just kind of say, "Okay, we've talked for about half an hour, Uncle Clay. I'm going to go talk to the doctors, and I'll see you tomorrow." Because, you can tell it's just taking a lot of energy from him. And at this point, I'm trying to look at all of his monitors, gather as much information as possible, look at all of his pumps.
Do your nurse thing.
Yeah. And it's all international, too. So, it's
different
international,
different
measurements, different medications, different language. And I'm texting you at the same point here. And I think my first reaction, and I think I texted you, was, how soon can we get him off this island? Yeah. Just looking at him. How can we, what's the holdup here? How can we get him off this island? Yeah. And your response to me was, well, we're waiting for a doctor stateside to accept him. And right now it's between Madigan, which would be a step-down bed, which means it's less acute care.
Right.
Or Balboa in San Diego, which has ICU beds. And we just need one of them to accept it.
Or Hawaii at that point, too. I think Tripler was still an option in Hawaii. So, but yes.
Yeah, so my gut reaction, because I was a step-down nurse, was like, oh, gosh. First of all, I don't know how... international. I don't know how international medical flights work, but he does not look stable enough to make it on a flight like this. Yeah. And if I were to receive a patient like this as a step-down nurse, I would be terrified.
Yeah.
And because he was stable, the doctors were correct in telling us, oh, he's stable, but he looked like he was gonna.
He could go any moment.
Yeah, teeter-totter. And so I just went out to the doctors out of the desk and. They unfortunately made me try to say this in French.
As the French people do.
But I was just like, hey, I need you to not sugarcoat it. This is what's happening. We're between two hospitals. We need one of the doctors to accept it. We need you to convince Balboa to accept him. Mm-hmm. Please don't sugarcoat it. And I think that they weren't quite sure if he was really ICU or step-down appropriate. Their unit was tiny and really did have more medical supplies than I was expecting, but was kind of an ICU and a step-down unit.
Yeah, they had a different protocol. It seemed like their protocol was to save life, not necessarily to sustain.
Yeah, it's kind of like ER triage.
Right,
situation.
We're just going to keep you on intubated because we just don't have. It's either intubated or nothing. There's no next step down or whatever.
Yeah, and they were able to do ultrasounds, and they put in a nerve block. They put in a chest tube. They had the basic toolbox, and they had a ventilator. So they had more than I was expecting. And it was, looked like new equipment. It looked pretty good. All of their, pretty much all their staff seemed like they were from France.
Yeah.
They seemed like they were very well educated, very hardworking, obviously very short staffed on the tail end of a pandemic.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's kind of where I left for the day and walked home and then walked to the grocery store. And then Wednesday I came back and I was like, I left and the doctors were like, well, maybe tomorrow he'll be extubated. We'll take the breathing tube out because maybe his pain will be controlled enough that he'll be able to clear his own secretions and we'll wean his pain medicine and he'll be fine. And at that point, the conversation with the doctors was, hey, doctor, how do we get him home? And their response was like, oh, well, he could go on a commercial flight or he could have a medical evacuation. What's his insurance like? I was like, give him whatever he needs. He's military. He will be fine. He needs to be medically evac. Like, he can't go on a commercial flight.
Right. I mean, that was one of the holdups anyway, was the COVID situation too. The commercial airlines were not an option until at the earliest 7 days past a negative test, and in some cases 2 weeks past a negative test. So commercial, even if he was medically cleared, he would be waiting for a commercial flight.
Well, he would have been in Tahiti, I don't know, at least a month. Yeah, because it's like, you can't recline.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So anyway, so you're boots on ground now, which is great. We're getting real ground truth. Nate is in Seattle here. Steven is running some gear down to him as Nate gets his emergency passport, and then Nate flies out. And to sort of just bring this back to Christ again, I mean, the whole example Jesus used with his disciples of sending them 2 by 2, I think is an important point to make here, in that it wasn't just sending Jess out. Even though you were focused and you were able to do all the medical stuff, it was important to have Nate, I think, as a backup. And Nate 100%. Specifically, because I know you and I know that you're awesome, but I also know that you will burn yourself out. And Nate's
the worst case scenario. We can flash forward at some point. There was one point where I kind of jokingly tried to drown myself through a panic attack.
Right. And
in the ocean.
You have a good heart of service, but at the expense of yourself. sometimes. And so I knew Nate would be a good backup anyway, to kind of balance that emotion for you. And again, to mom and dad, and like you said, Nate, just to be able to get them things, water and snacks and jokes and whatever, just to alleviate the isolation there. And so Nate is now on his way. Yep.
So
the
now
next day.
Interrupt you. So this is
ahead.
Wednesday, and I have so many good things to say about Nate. So I'll try and go through this quickly. But Wednesday,
can go forever.
Sorry, I'm like, we've been talking already. We're only on Wednesday. Yeah. So Wednesday, I go in finally. They make us wait till 1 p.m. for visitation hours. So I wait patiently till 1, and, I'm hoping to see him extubated and talking, and, I took his phone home and charged it up so we can have a FaceTime. I think he had already FaceTime. Yep, Bev and I FaceTimed with him on Tuesday when I arrived. And so when I got there Wednesday, I was like, oh, he does not look like he's improving. His vital signs don't look like he's improving. He looks like he's in pain. He's more sedated, receiving more pain medication, and his vital signs don't look like they're any better.
Yeah, every text I send out to like the 400 people who want to know how Clay and Bev are doing, the one day it's like, oh, he's improving, prayers are great. The next day Jess is like, he's not going to make it.
I apologize for that.
I'm like betting, like, how much of this do I share with his loved ones?
Yeah, let me just clarify. I'm not an ICU nurse, never was an ICU nurse. I just have a little bit of every nurse has some instinct after you've been in critical care of like, oh gosh, his numbers are okay, but it's really a question mark right now.
Yeah.
Who knows? And I was consulting some ICU nurses back home, but so Wednesday I come in hoping to see him extubated. The doctors at this point have been like, that's our plan. And he did not look okay. And so I called Aunt Bev. They had, maybe a 10-second conversation. And he was just, the emotion of seeing Bev was so overwhelming for him. Yeah. His body just could not take the overwhelming emotion. And so I think I played the day before. I'd spent more time explaining and talking to him and playing more music. And that day I just played I Shall Not Want. And then I pushed it and played
Is He Worthy?
Is He Worthy? Yeah. And this memory will stick with me forever. He looked up to the sky and mouthed the words with the tube in his mouth. And he just looked like he was preparing to go under and getting his marching orders and making peace with God either way.
Yeah.
And he had cried a little bit the day before when he listened to that, but the experience of him in his whole crushed body and his whole being worshiping God in that moment, like his vital signs went off the chart. And I was like, oh my goodness, I just broke him, and like freaked out and went out and got the nurse to get him more pain medicine. Like, oh no. Came back and like, okay, he's okay. But he was exhausted. He looked like he ran a marathon after that. It's a 4-minute song. It's a really long song, or even 6-minute. But there's this verse that I'm memorizing now. It's Psalm 103. It's the whole chapter. But it starts off with all my, praise the Lord, my soul, all my inmost being, praise his holy name. And that's what that felt like. This man has been praising the Lord his whole life. It's part of his inmost being now. When he's not even physically present, he is praising God. Yeah. Like it just looked like through trial, he was not only making a peace with what could happen, but also had kind of it seemed like a resolve of like, I will trust you through this. And so then I left. Cool. I was like, gosh, before I stress him out anymore, I'm going to leave, go get food, get ready for Nate to land.
Yeah.
And Nate landed at 7 p.m. that day and found his way to me.
Somehow.
Yeah. Baby bird arrived at the nest.
That's what you texted me. That was the text. Baby bird has landed.
Which fit, because Baby Bird was my street name all along. But
in your Coast Guard gang.
My Coast Guard gang. No, that's I think that's a good transition. I think up until then, I was dealing with the passport, dealing with Seattle, having, Steven's been awesome, and he ran up some clothes and some stuff for mom, and I think for even for dad, just in this little backpack, just in hopes that if I had seen mom, or if we could get it to mom, that I'd be able to bring, that we'd be able to bring this stuff to mom, and she'd have a little bit more than just the clothes that she's been wearing. Because you think of hospitals here in the U.S. where the moment you get in, they immediately put you into whatever the technical term is for the hospital gown that works. and then, but mom's in her old accident clothes, and she hasn't taken a shower or anything like that. And I don't even remember if she had shoes or anything, but, so we're grabbing all that stuff and getting ready for jumping on the plane. And I'm also talking to Jess, I think at this time in between waiting for my passport to get printed out, is we're trying to get the most bang for our buck. And so it's like, okay, well, this might potentially be a long-term situation of mom and dad being in the hospital there in Tahiti. Jessica, you can stay out for this long, in Tahiti. How long can I, maybe I shouldn't show up until later, especially at this point, if the doctors are saying, oh, it's pretty hopeful that, Clay can fly out, and we'll try to get him, medevac here soon and stuff like that. He's on the up and up. And so I'm at this point thinking maybe I won't show up till later, so that way I can trade out with Jessica, last minute, and before she leaves, and then I stay out there for even longer. But then I decided, you know what? No, I better just come out and fly out soon. So yeah, I jumped on the plane, and I think that was Wednesday or Thursday.
That was
I
Wednesday
believe.
night.
Yeah, you got a flight earlier than expected because we thought you might be pushed until Friday, but you were able to get out a day or a day and a half early.
That was Thursday, yeah. I'm sorry.
Nice.
Yeah, so
right.
Wednesday was the first day I saw Clay, and then Thursday, was the day that he looked like he wasn't getting better, and you were already on your way.
Yeah. And because also I was at the State Department, and they're telling me, okay, we can print your passport out in like 2 hours, or we could print it out in 3 days. And so I was like, well, that tells me nothing, but I'm going to
sounds like
I'm going to
work.
plan. Right. All right. You guys
can you just push the button? Can you just flip it? Can you just flip the button and print it right now?
So I'm really hoping that they can print it out in 2 hours, and that's ultimately what they did end up doing. Thankfully, and because I was originally going for, guys, I'll be out there in, maybe Friday, Saturday time frame, but they printed it out 2 hours later, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be on the next flight, to Tahiti, if I can. So then I ended up flying out there on Thursday, and, spent the night in the USO in Seattle, flew out Thursday, and I get in I want to say the same time frame, around 7 if I remember right. Yeah. And yes, at this point, Jessica's been awesome. She's like printed out, or she took snapshots of like the Airbnb map, and she's like, it's this house, it's, the third house on the right past a chicken.
There's
it's
no
like,
way you can screw this up.
Take a look at the
literally,
chicken.
Exactly. There's, very detailed. And so I get to the airport, grab my stuff, and I get a taxi. And my taxi driver is named Hans, and he's going to be our, he's awesome. If you ever go to Tahiti, what's that?
He's our hero.
Hans is a literally amazing taxi driver. He's the best. If you ever go to Tahiti, definitely look for him. Look for a man named Hans. He's not Swedish or anything like that. He's Tahitian, but he was awesome. And I showed him the map and everything like that, and he's like, oh yeah, I know where that is. And so we go down, and we're going down this dark street, and I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna survive this. I think Hans, I don't know Hans at this point. I think he's gonna take me out, and show me somewhere. I don't know, but
taking number 3.
But right. And so we finally get to where we are, and Sarah, my wife, finally was able to help me with the international plan. I message Jess that I'm outside this compound that was the Airbnb with a gate and everything, She lets me in, and then she basically, turns from, I think the husky was the word that I had heard. But it was very much German Shepherd situation of all right, put your stuff down. We're going to go see your dad. And we're going to eat some tuna fish that I bought for you. And
this is why I said, this was the right man for the job, because he just so calmly, I pretty much, the most hands off I was letting him get to the Airbnb, and I was sending him all these detailed texts of how to get there, assuming he didn't have internet or anything. And he just let me onboard him right away. I was like, I think the joke was eat your gruel in March. Because really, I had this really gross tuna fish sandwich waiting for him. Like, okay, carb up, we're going. And we had gotten an Airbnb like a 5 or 6 minute walk away from the hospital. And just to backtrack, sorry to take the story over again, I missed out on part of the story. So Thursday at 1, I saw Clay, and he was just maxed out just from a 10-minute conversation. And I left and went and walked to the grocery store to buy some thank you bribes for the nurse staff, which turned out to be like sad little croissants for this French team. I'm sure they didn't enjoy it. But when I came back at like 4 p.m., Clay had taken a turn for the worst. And one of the things I remember was I'd been following all of his vital signs and what medication they were giving him. But one of the measurements is the FiO2, so the forced oxygen. Excuse me. And at that point, it was up to 80%. I think it had been like 55 or 60 before. And he just did not look good.
Which for those lay listeners like myself means he's on 80% supplemental oxygen, and he's only breathing 20% of his own, right? So,
gosh, I'm sorry for medical and scientific people. This is going to be a butchered job, but regular oxygen that we breathe right now is like 21% oxygen.
Okay.
So once you're intubated, you can increase the percentage of forced inspiratory oxygen.
Okay.
And then you can also control the rate of respiration and the depth of respiration.
Okay. So basically it was more machine, less Clay.
Yes. So at that point, I saw him at 1 and was like, oh, he looks like he is struggling, which was not what I had hoped to walk into. And then came back 3 hours later and I was like, okay, I don't even have time to look at what's happening, but just walking into this room, all of my nursing signals are alerting right now without really getting a full picture. So I think the nurse kind of walked into that room with his eyes wide open. Tutu, Tibu, my hero. That was the nurse that I enjoyed. And he just kind of like, his eyes were pretty big and my eyes were pretty big without really struggling through a conversation again. And I was like, can I get Nate, his son, here tonight? And I just had this gut.
Like, this is it.
This could be it.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, I was like, hey, he's going to be here at like 9 p.m. well after visiting hours are over. Can I bring him here? And he said, give it a try. Come here. And this hospital, it's kind of in the bowels of the hospital. You have to like go through all these like kind of locked doors. You have to sneak your way through, not locked doors, but you have to kind of know your way. And then there's a lobby that normally someone greets you and then unlocks the ICU door for you.
Yeah.
So he's like, if you can find your way down here, good luck. We will do our best to connect you.
Yeah.
But do try. Anyway, so then Nate arrives and you take over, Nate.
Yeah. No. I like that's a good description of it. It's a very dad's where dad was definitely in the bowels of the hospital, and normally you can figure out where you're going because you okay, well, he's in the surgical room or he's in whatever space, but everything is in French and Tahitian. All the signs are in French and Tahitian, and there's like handwritten notes on doors about visiting hours and stuff like that. That's also in French or Tahitian. And so it was interesting for me after I had dropped off all my luggage, all my all the stuff at the Airbnb and scarfed down I think it was the tuna fish sandwich, and and we had gone. I don't know if it was medical ignorance or what, but I didn't really grasp the full situation, basically
all the logistics.
I don't know, just yeah, and just like exactly where Dad was at this point, like medically, and so I'm here thinking, all right, I'm here, cool, everybody's good, just like a little turtle, just like, all right, we're good,
Baby
and just
bird.
like you, like, yeah, come on, like your dad doesn't have much time left, like let's go see him. And I was like, oh shoot, okay. So then we walked to the hospital, get there, and weaving in and out, and I think if I remember right, I don't think we were even able to see Dad at that point, right?
No, so
Thursday.
The backstory, sorry, I keep taking over, but
no, you're good.
As soon as I landed Tuesday, Tim had said, hey, can you find flights to Raiatea to go get Mom, to go get Bev? And we can talk more about that in a second, but I knew that if we were able to get flights, which was pretty difficult, that I was going to be leaving shortly to go get her. And so on that walk there, I was like, okay, here's the Airbnb. Here's how you get in. Here's the phone number that you need to call if you can't get in. Here's how you get food.
Doing a full turnover with Nate because you might be gone.
Onboarding him quickly. Like, here's how you call the doctor. Here's what you say.
He's like, it's good to see you too. Yeah. How long has it been?
Yeah, right. Tie your bootstraps. Let's go. Also, like, you need to take a left at this green sign, and then, we're going to go past this sign, and don't talk to that person. No, just kidding. But like, hey, this is how you find this place without me, because I might not be here tomorrow. We're figuring that part out. So I think we made it to the lobby, to the locked door. I knocked on the door, and the nurse aide came, and I was like, hey, can we go see Clay Miller? And she was like, we're doing things right now. We'll just wait here and we'll see. And so we waited there for 2 hours.
Wow.
Until your eyes just looked like they were, I don't know, you were looking real droopy. And I think you finally asked, like, hey, I think I need to go home and go to sleep. I was like, okay, that's fair. We'll come back in the morning.
And I think we did get an update on Dad's condition there, because at this point, and this is the whole disconnect between, French medical speak and normal medical speak and stuff like that. But I think they had said that Dad was in a coma.
No, not yet. No,
not yet.
No, the only update that I had was seeing him at 4 p.m., which was like, oh gosh, gut wrenching, something's wrong. To trying to see him and them saying we're doing some sort of something on him, and then just not bringing us to go see him. So that's all the information we had that night.
Okay. So it was still like at that point, like I was just getting off the airplane and it being so late, time difference and stuff, I was like dead to the world. But then I was like, I know that Dad's in a serious situation, so I know I want to stay here as long as I can. But then it seemed like, you know what? I don't want to be a hindrance. If I want them to give Dad all the care that they can, and I can't help Dad medically, and he didn't seem like he's in a position to even see me. So, I'm not gonna. 2 hours later, maybe let's just get home and try first thing in the morning, to see if we can go see Dad. And I think that's ultimately what we ended up doing. So, go back home, get a good night's sleep, wake up the next day.
Yeah. So you want to talk about what you arrived and saw the next day?
So, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I think my details are still a little bit off from what I remember. But we go the next day, and Dad, because he wasn't able to clear his
secretion,
just the gunk in his lungs and stuff. He had developed, and I think at this point he had developed ARDS, right? Acute respiratory distress syndrome. And so, and like Jess had said a little bit earlier, because of all of his broken ribs and everything, he wasn't able to expand his lungs to where they needed to be. And I didn't realize this, but your lungs apparently expand both out front and then out back, out your back, kind of both ways. But because they needed him to be able to work his lungs more to clear out that fluid, they were essentially what you said, rotisserie chickening Dad to be able to clear out his lungs the best that he could. And so I had seen Dad. It was that morning, if I remember right, and he was face down, intubated, and he just completely unresponsive. So that way they could get the lungs to expand out the back the best that they could, and to clear out all. He had a chest tube clearing all the fluid out of his lungs as well and stuff. And so that was my first image of Dad, was just face down, unresponsive, tubes, sticking out everywhere, and them saying he's got a really, and in a coma, yeah, and saying like he's not, he's got a very bad respiratory sickness, and these are, and then Jess started telling me the oxygen levels that I have to look out for, and I think at that point they were rising, which is the way that they don't want to go, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So you, kind of arrived in this really traumatic, dire situation where, okay, we knew a complication could happen and now it did. And he is not doing well. We have now, put him into a medical coma. So it's like a chemical paralytic, and put him face down, so proned him. And we also have his ventilator settings really high, and his vital signs don't look very good. So you're walking in you haven't seen your dad at this point. It's your first time seeing him. And really, you can get all of the medical reports under the sun, but it really doesn't hit home until you see it, I think. Even for me as a nurse, where I've seen it before, it's different with a family member. So you're walking in, seeing him in a rough place and face down. You can't see him. And I'm also trying to onboard you quickly as far as like, here's the numbers you need to send back to Tim while I'm gone because I'm leaving you.
Yeah.
So let me give you,
pressure.
I'm not an ICU nurse. I'm trying to figure out this stuff as I go, but let me teach you what I know. And you just handle that so beautifully. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. It was very, I was having to stay up on my feet, a lot, trying to learn, all these different medical, terms, and then all these, different numbers that I need to, like what numbers are good, what numbers are bad. And, am I, all the beeps that are happening coming from Dad's machine right now, when everything starts beeping, and
we're wearing,
turning
COVID
red.
protection, so you're like sweating your butt off.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, and these rooms, and like, I think we said it a little bit before, like, in a U.S. hospital, like you normally get the hospital gowns and a pillow and everything. And there's air conditioning and lights, sufficient lightage and different things like that. But Dad's room is like bare minimum, and which, it's the best that they can do. And they have the right equipment and everything like that. But there's like no AC. And there's, it's just a kind of pretty bad ventilation for trying to not sweat, while in the hospital gowns that we're in. So
let alone
it was a crazy situation.
His own body trying to fight off an infection and everything else too in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's Friday.
So it was,
and that is now
Thursday still.
Oh, that's
right.
No, Friday morning.
No, that's Friday morning.
Yeah,
it was Friday morning.
And that's now basically a full week since the accident happened the Saturday prior. So what happens the rest of that day, Friday?
Gosh, I can't even remember the rest of the day Friday.
Because you don't leave for Ride 2 on Friday.
No, I must have left Saturday night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh.
I believe it was Saturday night.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember. So I think I showed him how to get to the grocery store.
Yeah, just some more introduction and onboarding Friday, and then
We had
Saturday
to go,
as well.
Yeah, and I just cannot remember what we did Friday night. I don't know if you went back to the hospital or.
So I think at this point too, Tim was able to get Mom a charger, and so we were able to talk to Mom a little bit. And at that point, I mean, Dad had been basically airlifted and ripped away from Mom, and Dad was, I don't know how responsive he was when Dad left Mom. But just putting myself in her shoes, or just knowing, like, if Sarah and I were in that situation and Sarah had gotten ripped away, and these French doctors were telling me basically, your spouse is in critical condition, or whatever they had told Mom at that point, and not knowing exactly where Dad's getting taken to and how he's going to be doing. And also my phone is dying, and everything else. All that to say is I wanted to make sure that Mom got a good connection to Dad. And so Friday and Saturday, I tried to be back to go see Dad at least twice a day for a solid couple hours, and also FaceTime Mom in the hospital there so that Mom could see Dad's face. And I just held up, even though Dad was in a medical coma, paralyzed, we still believed that he could, he might not be able to process, but he could still hear our voices. And so, having Mom be able to see Dad, that Dad is alive, Dad is being taken care of, and for Dad to hear Mom's voice, I wanted to make that like one of my main missions is just like be that connection for them.
Yeah. And so, I remember you made a really good point. Like, at this point, Tim and I are talking quite a bit as far as like, what is the plan? Like, let's get Clay off this island. We will figure out how to get Bev off the island later. Because, and I think maybe this is a good segue into talking about Bev. Because really, like, as soon as we get there, we're like, we need to get Clay off the island. What can we do? And we weren't doing a good job of including her. I think I had looped her into conversation with Clay directly, but the like back end brainstorming of what do we do, I think was very like short and clipped with her, and she might not have even had a phone for a lot of it. And so when you came, you really did have a lot of intention of like, okay, we really need to start running these things by Mom so she can be included.
Yeah.
And so you want to talk about the...
So, and Clay Dad had FaceTime me when they put that block in him a couple days prior. That was the last face-to-face conversation I had with Dad. And then I got to FaceTime with Nate when Dad was already in the coma, which was great. So that's been Dad the whole week. He's in Tahiti. He's up and down every day, and who knows what's going on. Mom, multiple fractures, breaks in her pelvis, and otherwise, and a lot of sores and cuts and bruises and things like that. But otherwise, medically, she's miraculously okay, which is great. But emotionally, she's in the worst position of it all, just because Dad's not cognizant of what's going on. But Mom is fully cognizant and isolated and alone. Dad's international phone is with Dad in Tahiti. Mom's phone doesn't have a charge and is not on a plan, and they don't have a phone in the hospital, and the hospital there is not talking to the hospital in Tahiti. And so the little bit of information she's getting is difficult. And I'm calling her several times a day and night to sort of feed her the information that I'm getting from the doctors in Tahiti. But then this is really where, again, back to God's sovereignty, I'm looking for this group of folks out there that will do deliveries and sort of like an Uber Eats, I guess, not sponsored, and something like that. And I come across, and I'm also looking at just churches in the area to try to find support and using resources that I have to find connections in this place that is fairly remote. And this woman named Samantha, I get in contact with, and it sort of probably comes off as a spam call to her, I'm sure, is what she's thinking. Like, hey, I'm a guy from America, and I will pay you lots of money to go bring my mom a phone charger and a meal, a hot meal, because they're not feeding her either in the hospital, and so, or they're feeding her very basic
bread and chocolate milk,
bread and chocolate milk, right? And so, I'm sure in her mind, Samantha's mind, she's like, okay, like this is, we see that Nigerian prince stuff all the time in the U.S., and this is their version of that. But she ends up coming through on day 3, I believe it is, with food and a charger and a pillow and a change of clothes. And she helps mom shower and clean up and change clothes and eat and get the charger, which is how she's able to now communicate with Jess and Nate and Clay on FaceTime and the rest of us. And so that alone was, I think, that whole time when I was talking with her on the phone, the hard landline to the hospital, all of her mind was, man, I'm sitting here for 24 hours in a white wall room with nothing. They don't have a TV or anything, no phone or anything, no books, nothing. And so she's literally alone to her thoughts and the Lord for 3 days. And what an awesome testimony for me to be able to see that as her son, but also to be able to share that with everybody that's asking multiple times a day of like how they're doing, and say, mom is at peace, mom is at rest, mom is displaying a faith in the middle of her best friend who she may lose, and this loneliness, and to just see how strong my own mother was and be able to witness that was a real just glory for me and glory to God in that moment. And so we're trying to get her reunited with Dad, but because she's not medically critical, there's no medical flight that will take her. And so what we end up doing is
she's COVID positive,
and she's COVID positive. So then what commercial flight will take her? Thankfully, they are on the Raiatea side are able to book the back half of a commercial flight for me, and we get multiple seats there. And so we send Jess out.
Luckily, sorry, I'm going to interrupt and we'll go back to you. But, the first day that I arrived, I was like, went out and talked to the nurses, and I was like, hey, I'm trying to get my aunt from Raiatea to here to reunite them. And they're like, oh boy, all the school children, there's only one high school on the island, just about. So all the school children have already booked the flights to Tahiti because they're coming back from vacation to start school.
Yeah, that's right, because we were trying to get you a ferry.
We were looking for a boat taxi, which would have been a 7-hour choppy flight with a broken hip. So, I think that we had like a day and a half of struggle, because I think you also had to book her flight and a nurse, and then a return flight from the nurse.
Right. Yeah. So originally it was booking this French nurse to accompany mom to Tahiti, and then having to book her back. But we were able to figure out if we can book Jess as a nurse. They will release her.
Oh, goody.
To Jessica. And so,
I know what I'm doing.
And
sure.
And then we don't have to fly her back, which was great. And it's someone she knows. And speaks English and all the things. And so that's when we got you a flight on Saturday. You flew there, spent the night with mom. Samantha had been with mom every day at that point now for the last 4 or 5 days. She introduced her family to mom. She had told her about her daughter. She gave her some sweet pearls as a gift and a Bible and just all sorts of really wonderful things.
They became sisters.
Yeah. Just a great experience and another testament to God's faithfulness and all of that. And then Jess and made it back to Tahiti on Sunday. So they booked the back end of the seats on the commercial flight and had Mom on this board, which was painful.
Yeah, so Saturday, Nate and I visited Clay one more time in the hospital, and then went and got their suitcases from the airport, I think.
Mm-hmm. We had sent the suitcases to Tahiti instead of home.
Yes.
It was going to be cheaper, and they had their stuff there.
Yeah. And then I went out. I was losing my mind because I was like, oh, gosh, it was hard to book an Airbnb in Tahiti last minute, but it worked out beautifully. But now that I'm going to go, I book another Airbnb in this tiny little island with no reception, and I'm just going to have to figure it out. And I just have this, image of Haiti in my mind. Also, I have to, have this moment of giving up control because I don't want to leave Clay. Because the last time I left him, I came back and he was more critical than when I left. And so here's another night where I just don't know what's going to happen. And so this is where, Nate is just really sweet. And I'm like, I'm going out on a run. I'm like, in a panic attack, plunge myself into the ocean in the cold water and just float. And just like, okay, God, make this trip okay. So got to Raiatea and saw your mom, and she just has this beautiful effect of like, oh, okay, we're here. We're getting Mama Bird back to the nest. And kind of what you were talking about of, Bev and Clay, I feel like they touched so many people in their short time there. And when we left Raiatea, there were lines of people that came to say goodbye to Bev and give her gifts of thank you. Because I think she was just in this like terrible week, had touched and like bonded with so many people and was so loving.
As my mom would.
Yeah. And we can, talk to her about her perspective on the next podcast. But we did load her. We got her on a plane. They loaded her up on a stretcher. It was like a commercial little tiny plane. And she just shoved in this like cargo.
Sorry, Mom.
Space like she's a suitcase, and I don't have any extra pain medications for her. Like it's only an hour flight, but and I had some music and some smelly good things for her, but that's about it. And prayers, and the whole hour I'm like, okay, if we crashed, do you think I could drag her out of the plane? Maybe, I don't know. Just like running these emergencies through my brain, but
overanalyzing as you do.
Yes. Worst case scenario.
In a good way.
But I think maybe I'll talk more about this on the next podcast with her. But, that was not a comfortable flight for her. And it was not a comfortable offboarding of the plane. They kind of messed up and had to lift her off with a broken hip. And she just prayed the entire time. And after she was lifted and had some pretty bad pain, then she told me this beautiful story on the ambulance ride about how she knew that Clay was the one for her and like how much love she had for your dad. And then told me all more stories about how much she loves my parents. And so just as when she's like kind of punch drunk from pain, she's just loving people and sharing how much love she has. So I can see why so many people fell in love with her. But
that's her personality. The default, it's amazing to see kind of what you had mentioned about Clay too. The first thing he asked was, "How's my wife?" When people are oblivious of themselves, or they're under the influence of medication, or in so much pain, or just out of it, who are they at their core? And their core values exude themselves. That character then shows its authentic moment and authentic part of their life. And it's an honor to be their son and be able to witness
just a lot of authentic love for God and for other people, and really genuinely praising. I had to have kind of a heart-to-heart, like hard talk with her, because I saw her and she just felt relieved that she saw me and she's going to get off this island. This feeling of like, okay, we have a plan. We're going to get you to Tahiti.
Yeah.
And I had to have a talk with like, hey, Clay, is not doing well right now. and he might not make it. We don't know. And she just had this, I think we all have different ways of processing, but she had very optimistic processing. And
I don't think you heard me.
Yeah. It was a very delicate conversation of like, hey, I don't want you to get caught when we get back. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I just do think like she has a lot of praise. Like, she did say like, I had a lot of time to think about it, and I've had X amount of years more with Clay than my mom did with her husband, and like kind of made a peace with either scenario, and really was just praising God through any scenario.
Wow. Cool. So they make it back. You guys make it back on Sunday. And Nate, how are you doing on time right now? We're an hour and a half into this awesome episode, and we can pause it if needed, but we can keep going.
If I have a little bit longer.
Okay.
That's all right with you guys.
You let us know then. Yeah. So it's Sunday, and you guys, and Nate, you held down the fort that night, and then tell us about that, and then take us through Sunday and Monday.
Well, I mean, you guys just painted this beautiful picture of mom just letting dad go into God's hands of like, if dad passes, then that's okay, and I'm at peace with it, and it was really a testament of seeing mom's faith throughout this whole situation, not just faith with how God is going to take care of dad, but also the faith with and trust with the situation that she was in. And I think leading up to before Jesse had flown out to go take mom from Raiatea to Tahiti, we were kind of also like, okay, well, is the hospital in Tahiti gonna take mom in, and is there gonna be room for her, or are we gonna have to have her like sleep at the Airbnb with us? Like, what's going on, and the whole logistics of that. I feel like something that we were struggling with, but thankfully the hospital did say, yep, we have a room for her, and so that was amazing to see. Mom and Jessica flew back, and I got the text from Jessica saying that mom's here, mom's finally settled in, and you can come see her, because I was just gonna try to be at the airport and see the whole hospital ride, or the ambulance ride and everything like that, but I wanted to also be there for dad, so got the text that mom was there, rushed over there to go see her, and that was just, I think I was able to see some amazing relief from her as well. It's just I'm here, and it was relief for me too, knowing that mom wasn't in that situation and in Raiatea any longer, and that finally mom and dad had been together, again, at least on the same island, in the same area, which I know was huge for her. And so I think it was after we got mom some pain meds, we ended up bringing mom over to, actually, Jessica, I think you were dead to the world, if I remember right. So you're like, I'm going to head back to the Airbnb, and I'm going to sleep. And then I took mom to go see dad at the in dad's room, and because and no fault of Jessica's own, because she did a great job at onboarding me and showing me around. Okay, this is the exact route that you take to get to Clay, to the room that he is in. I took mom, popped her in her wheelchair that was made out of PVC pipes, and and I took her, and I think I wheeled her around. She was up on like the third floor of this hospital. Dad was down in the basement, and I wheeled mom around for a solid like 20 minutes. And it should have taken only like less than 3, I think, to get down to dad's room from mom's room. But it was like, all right, do I go to the reanimation room or to the bonjour room? I don't know what's happening. So we finally made it down there, and got in and got mom to see dad, and You could just see
he was face
just
up at that point, right? I think
he was, yes.
Yeah, mom had,
if I'm not mistaken.
Mom had called me and said we're lost, and so that's when I knew.
Yeah.
I said, because I checked in with her, I said, "You made it to Tahiti, okay?" And she said, "Yeah, we made it here, and the flight was painful, but we're alive, and all this, all these good things. But we're lost. Nate's trying to find us our way down," and I was like, "There's no one better for this right now." So, because even in the midst of being lost in the goofiness that is Nate, you've got the joy and the love and the compassion and the tenderness that mom needs in that moment. So even in 20 minutes of wandering the halls of the hospital, she's with someone she knows and comforted by that, which is awesome.
At least we're lost together, and that's all that
exactly
matters. So yeah, we finally make it there, reel her in, and Dad is face up at this point. And I'm getting all the details about Dad's condition, and I'm trying to explain it to Mom as well. And meanwhile, over the last couple of days, Dad has kind of been back and forth. One day he's better, one day he's less. Going into taking a step back in the condition that he's in. But it seemed like now Dad was at least okay, if I remember right. Still not doing good, but he wasn't doing worse.
I think we describe it as he's not out of the woods, but we can feel like we're seeing the edge of the trees or something like that. Like, we just don't know on this teeter-totter like where he's at, but it feels like we're stable still. We just have to wait.
Yeah. And so I think that Mom was able to see that. I was hopefully able to explain that to her the best I could, and I just gave Mom a moment to be with Dad as I stepped out of the room, and I think Mom just kind of just poured out to Dad and just told him how how much he loves him and how much she loves him and is just made peace with everything that's going on, and that was that day. Finally Mom and Dad were reunited, and also Mom was spent. So it wasn't a very quick visit for Mom, but it was good enough. And I think Mom just went back to her room and just fell asleep at that point in a better room. She finally had a window that she could see, and she had a charger and her phone, and she was able to relax for the rest of that day.
Yeah, and that really felt like to me the climax of the trip. As far as like, gosh, no matter what happens, we have reunited them now. Like they can be together through the next step of their journey. And at least for me, it was like, okay, like I know I've done everything in my control at this point, and Tim is like working, endlessly on the back end to figure out, the logistics of the
Not
flight.
Endlessly.
Well, it seemed like it. So that's Sunday. That's Sunday. And I feel like from that point on, like Monday, it was like, okay, we're still in this stable critical, but it hasn't changed. It hasn't gotten worse. And each day it was like, okay, it hasn't gotten worse. It maybe is a little nudge towards good. Like to the point where it was like Wednesday, and I think on Monday we're like, okay, we're going to get the flight there on Wednesday. And I was like, whoa, that seems fast. But then Wednesday came and it was like, okay, we need to, I think it just seemed like the puzzle pieces were fitting as far as we might be able to get the doctors to sign off to send him home. We're going to get the flight team here. Mm-hmm. And that was Tim's call, and it was a good call. But in that process, like in those couple of days of like wait and see, and like he turned the corner for good, there was a lot of relationship beauty as far as like seeing how your mom, I think we have a beautiful picture of her praying with your dad, and worshiping and reading scripture over him. And then also Tim connected us with some missionaries there, Mark and Perkins, who came. I think they visited before Bev was even in Tahiti, and then came and visited and prayed with them again.
Yeah.
It was, you're exactly right. I think there was a lot of like just relationship building now that we knew that the biggest or the first hurdle, so to speak, was over. We finally got mom and dad connected again, and now we kind of just took a step back and we're like, okay, all right, we're good. Now let's just focus on seeing dad's situation. And for me, I had that goal of like, okay, what do we need? What do we need to see dad at physically for him to be able to be medevaced? And we can figure out all the other details later, but what is our goal here? And I think that was, dad's got to be on certain percent, supplied oxygen and fluid in his lungs and stuff like that. I don't know if that was part of it, but there were like certain boxes that needed to be checked off before dad can be stable enough to fly. Because once you're up in the air, that's a whole nother atmosphere, and that's a whole nother kind of situation that could potentially hinder his situation. So for me, just getting day by day was just like, all right, is dad needing that threshold? He's taking one little step towards it, maybe. All right, let's go on the next day. But in the meantime, yeah, we were able to see Mark and Perkins, and then also, we had finally decided to treat ourselves and do a long walk to I think McDonald's, and visited some restaurants and stuff. And meanwhile, because mom's all like, oh, just go enjoy Tahiti, and I'm like, I would love to, but that's not what I'm here for.
Snorkeling.
Yeah,
snorkeling.
We cannot find time to snorkel. Like, this is just. I think we took a picture of us wearing her snorkel gear that she, I think you spent a lot of time repacking her suitcases for her.
Yeah.
And so I think we had our first morning. We were kind of out of the woods with medical stability, and we had a morning just to drink coffee and talk. And so we threw on some snorkel gear and snapped a picture and sent it out because so many people were asking us if we had snorkeled yet. We're like, no, we can't. We don't have time.
Just mom being
don't have
thoughtful,
time.
Thoughtful of others, and I'm sure you guys are having a good time.
Yeah. Well, and I think the last thing I wanted to mention that touched me, and then, I'll probably hand off the story about the flight and then San Diego to you guys because that was your end of the deal. But I also was just very touched with how many people were touched in the ICU. I remember they let us, by some miracle, have 5 people in the room to pray, even though it was COVID positive. In some ways we had some liberties in Tahiti, and Nate and I had really spent a lot of time trying to be respectful to the medical team there, as far as staying within policy and not rocking the boat too much, but also being very inquisitive about what was happening,
right? And
being careful about our requests. And so they let all 5 of us in to pray and worship, and I just remember them spending some time, the medical team, doing their rounding and looking in on us, all the entire medical staff of the floor looking in on us, worshiping and praying over Clay. And I remember going out there and being like, are you okay? Do you need to come in and do medical care? And they're like, no, it's okay.
We're just curious.
But yeah, there were a lot of people there that I think definitely turned their heads at your parents and your family. So
I used all of this. I mean, part of your own story, even coming to faith, and the timing of that, how you ended up going out there. In just this recent part.
Clay and Bev had helped lead me to the Lord. Someone had witnessed me in Wenatchee, and I just felt like it was a very clear call that I wanted to become a Christian, wanted Jesus as my Savior. And so, I drove out to Clay and Bev, a couple hours away, and had them pray with me to accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior. Mm-hmm. And then 2 weeks later, they got in this accident. So it's just another call and this shotgun training into how to praise God through the worst. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what I signed up for.
And no better teachers for them to be at peace with this whole thing while you're running around frantic for them, and they're totally at peace with it. And God's got us.
Yeah. Anyway, so
we're at the pivotal point here now. SOS flight is arriving. Jess had mentioned Singapore in the conversation early at the beginning of this episode. Singapore was the team that is regionally based, regionally responsible for the Tahiti area for the TRICARE medevac program. And so that just happened to be who was in on all of the logistics and the flight planning and the air doctors and nurses and all the staff there. And so we were finally able to get them coordinated and spun up for an exfil on Tahiti to Balboa, which was a blessing in and of itself. As much as we wanted them to be at Madigan, like Jess had mentioned, it was a step down bed in Madigan. And so we wanted the best care really for Dad. And so and the Lord knew that. The Lord knew that the bed available and the place he needed to be and the support he needed to have and Mom needed to have with the Fisher house there and her friends that are there that had an extra car and a place to stay and all that will come into the story later. God knew that was the place we needed to be, was Balboa. And so the air team was from a flight from Singapore, but the staff, all the medical staff, was not. They were from Dominican Republic, which was interesting. And so they brought together this international evac team, landed in Tahiti, had a meet and greet with the doctors there to make sure that they had all the right equipment on board and everything they needed for Mom and Dad. And one of our other concerns was making sure that Mom could also go on the same flight. Again, because she's not medically critical, we were really concerned that she may be stuck on a really long commercial flight back home, and that would be and not just painful, but then separated from Clay. And so that was an answer to prayer to be able to get both of them on board this little jetliner, Streamliner, and
he's still intubated. He's still in a medical coma.
Right.
They had a some sort of full works, abbreviated full works ICU room on this flight, which was 20-hour flight because I had to make a couple layovers.
Right. 2 pilots, 2 doctors, 2 nurse staff. One was a respiratory therapist nurse, and the other was a critical care nurse or something. And then Mom fully horizontal and Dad fully horizontal on this plane. And so, they had a couple stops to make, and then made it to Balboa. And shout out to the military service. If any of you are in the military and thinking about getting out, don't, because this is
TRICARE is where it's at.
This is TRICARE covered, and so just decline that extra medical insurance when you travel, because if you're TRICARE, you don't need it, and it only pays up to $25,000 anyway for the that alliance coverage that you get at most airlines or whatever. And so I forget what this flight was. It was $250,000 flight, and totally covered by TRICARE. So just another blessing. And so they got them into Balboa. We had spun up the staff there. The captain of the ward Dad was being accepted into was already read into his file, had been communicating with the staff in Tahiti, the doctor staff and medical staff in Tahiti, and they were expecting both of them. And then we'll pick up more of the story with Mom and Dad in person, because that'll be part of their arrival journey. But at that point, I don't know, Jess, what did you feel like? When the plane departed, did you feel sort of this like this big sigh of relief, or was it still like a few days before you kind of unwound and unpacked?
Well, I think for me, by like Tuesday of that week, I was like, okay, we're gonna get Clay home. Mm-hmm. I just felt in my gut.
That second week,
second week, like I think, Sunday we reunited them, Monday watched him, Tuesday. So, and we had, by that point I think by Monday you were like getting the gears going for the airplane to get here, because it takes a couple of days to coordinate them.
Yeah.
And at that point I was like, oh gosh, I don't think he's ready. And the puzzle pieces just kind of fit as time went on. So I think by Tuesday, I just felt fully confident that he was going to make it off the island. And so Nate and I actually flew out before their flight was actually able to leave.
Yeah, that's right. They were supposed to leave a day
Thursday
before. Yeah, Thursday.
There was all this humdrum.
They had a gas layover issue. What
and
was that island chain? They were supposed to lay over in...
I'd have to look. It's some tiny little island with just like a gas reef.
Something. Yeah, it was just a reef. Jamie, can you pull that up for us? It was just a reef with a gas line on it. And they never ended up getting approval, and so they just bypassed it. But it caused them a delay of a day. And
I think they were concerned that he was so critical still.
Right.
I think they were giving some pushback.
Right. And you guys had ended up flying out the day prior to them departing. And Nate, you flew out at the same time, right, as Jess?
That's right. Yeah, we were both on the same flight, and we were expecting Mom and Dad to fly out Friday morning, if I'm not mistaken.
Thursday at first, then Friday morning. Yeah, kept getting pushed.
That's
back.
Right. Yeah, and it kind of just getting pushed back. But I think we eventually, I was like, I need to get back at work and go back and see the family. And at this point, it wasn't a matter of, okay, is Dad going to make it? It's like, okay, he is going to make it, but and I feel okay now that Mom and Dad are together, just taking off and leaving, now that they're going to go to Balboa and be there together in the hospital. Cause Mom was going to get checked into the hospital as well. So
yeah. So you came home
left
and went back to Alaska then, right?
That's right. I flew back from Tahiti on Friday, made it to Seattle on, I think, Saturday with Jessica, and we kind of had just a fun get-together that night. And then the next day, I think everybody, Jessica, you flew out for your well-earned vacation, and then I flew back home to maybe the next day or 2 days later back to Juneau, Alaska, to be with the family, because in my mind at this point, okay, dad was going to be in Balboa, and he's going to get well cared there, and Mom's going to be in the hospital at least until she can walk on her own, and she's going to be in the room and discharged, because at this point Mom could not walk on her own, and she couldn't. She was able to kind of lift herself up, but she very much needed somebody to be there to help her, just get to the restroom, or like go from one area to another, bring her stuff, because she just couldn't walk on her own. So I was like, okay, well, at least there at the hospital, they'll bring her stuff and that'll be fine. Yeah. And that's where I was at mentally moving. Nice. But
yeah. Jamie just got back to me. Kiribati is the airport they were supposed to fly into. Just Google it for
Kiribati, and then Hawaii,
and then Hawaii, and
which
then
is so silly. Like the direct flight to San Diego is like 6 hours or something, but they made it a 20-hour flight. Just, I think it's for legal reasons. They had to be over
gas. They had to have so much
50%.
fuel. Of course, all the pilots listening will understand that aspect of it. But
it's not a slight at you.
If you're listening, you can Google Kiribati, K-I-R body B-A-T-I.
K-I-R-I-B-A-T-I.
Yeah, it's this tiny little atoll. That's just out in the middle of nowhere, but they've got a refueling station, and so that was the holdup, that initial leap. And so anyway, they made it the next day, and that again, just another act of God, because if they had come in the day before, this captain would not have been on duty, and so the one receiving them. And so when they landed, and I'll let Mom and Dad fill this part of the story in, she greeted them and she said, "Oh, we knew you were coming, and we've been expecting you, and I deal with this kind of these evacs often." And so she was ready for them. They had the bed ready for Dad in the ICU, and they had the room ready for Mom. And Mom was able to then get her physical therapy started right away over the weekend, as opposed to waiting until Monday to start. And then that will go into the rest of the story of how she was able to get blessed by a room with her friend, discharged with her friend there to stay locally, and then come back into the Fisher house on campus there to be next to Dad while we took turns. And then I was able to fly down finally, which was a huge blessing for me. And then Nate came down again, and then Stephen and your dad, Uncle Mark, came down. And so lots of good things to continue that part of the story as they begin their recovery. But the terminus of this, the end of this, is we all got him out of Tahiti, and you guys did a phenomenal job there. And I had a lot of support from people here that were calling often. Brian Stegman, one of Dad's best friends, who's also a pilot and able to give me clarification there. Stephen, our brother, was the one that found the TRICARE flights. Seth and Ben did a phenomenal job holding down the fort here and caring for Mom and Dad's home while they were gone. I mean, they were only supposed to be gone the 18 or so days for their honeymoon, and Mom has chickens, and they've got a little homestead here that needed lawn mowing and mail checked and all of the things that pertain to a home, and so they did great things caring for the homestead here. So just a lot of great teamwork.
And just, sorry, for me as an outsider, I just felt so blessed by the connection and community here. It really did feel like there were so many people on their team from around the world praying for them and asking how they were doing and supporting them. And that's just such a beautiful thing to see. Yeah. Shout out to Holly Kincaid and Marcia and Brian and everybody else who is just in their life, in my life, in our lives, and continually supporting in all the ways. And I know so many of you listening to wanted to be out there as well. I know there was a lot of phone calls and texts back and forth. I'm going out as well, and it was like, great. That's more the merrier at times. But the Lord, looking back on this, is so much easier than in the heat of the moment where we're vetting, what's too much, what's not enough, and so I know, speaking for them, it's and they'll say it themselves, but just how thankful they are and how thankful I am and we are for the prayers and the financial success and or support and the support with food and all the different things that were given. So, and the recovery process has been a huge blessing.
Yeah, which will be part 3 of this. So, yes. If you are listening in, we've got one more part that we will end this with Clay and Bev again on the episode, and maybe Nate and Jess as well, and some others. But Nate, did you want to finish out your thought there?
I think you said it really well. It's such a testament to Mom and Dad's faith, and how Mom and Dad, how much they're loved by everybody in the community there on Whidbey and all throughout the U.S. and just all around the world. How much Dad and Mom have kind of touched the lives of those around them throughout their lives, and then also just how many people were able to just bless Mom and Dad and us as we went through this whole situation as well, and just seeing how faithful God is and faithful you guys were to and supportive you were to this whole situation. I'm just so grateful for the support group that Mom and Dad have back at home, my brothers and all the siblings and the in-laws, and especially to my wife and my kiddos for letting me just have that time away from them again. And just for everybody's support financially and spiritually and emotionally through this whole process, because even though there were very key parts that needed to be played in this whole situation to get Mom and Dad connected again and healed and everything, I think everybody really had a very important role to play, even if you weren't physically there or weren't speaking with mom and dad right away. I think everybody, just from your faith and your prayers and every type of support, you guys played a huge part to play in their recovery. And so I'm seriously so thankful for that, and thankful for you guys. And I know that I've kind of walked away from this. This might sound cliche to say, but I know I've walked away from this whole situation just that much stronger in my faith with God, because I know that regardless of the situation, God has His hand over us in all things, and it definitely showed, especially in this situation. So, yeah.
Beautifully said.
Cool. All right. Well, that has been a wonderful 2 hours from the evac team, and we will be doing part 3 of this shortly. So stay tuned. Thank you again all for listening, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Ana Vivo podcast. We welcome your feedback and ideas. You can learn more about us by simply Googling the word Ana Vivo. This podcast is supported by listeners like you. I am a licensed real estate broker with Compass Real Estate and a nationwide real estate matchmaker. We consult with you for free, find and vet the right real estate professional that specializes in the area and niche you need, are paid by that professional, and they get clients like yourself who want and need their unique specialty or winning track record. If you or someone you know is in the market to buy or sell real estate anywhere in the U.S., don't simply web search the highest paying advertiser. Let us use our licensed experience to find and vet the real and best professional for you. It costs you nothing but a phone call or email with me, and has saved my clients financially and emotionally. I'd be honored to serve, and you can reach me direct by email at tim.c.miller@outlook.com. And as always, to God be the glory.